Hey guys, so I did a little bit of rearranging today. Yesterday I went to the store and I picked up a small television because I decided I needed a bigger surface to be looking at when I'm working on my computer, because I spend a lot of time writing, editing videos, editing photos, and all of the stuff. And while I love having a laptop and the mobility of it, looking at that tiny screen for the number of hours that I do was getting old. Prior to last year, well, a year ago, almost exactly, I had a desktop computer with this great big screen and I loved it. But I didn't like being tethered to one location. So I switched to a laptop. But that meant a little bitty screen, a little bitty screen. So I fixed that. I've got my computer set up and I've got the TV up there, and that doubles my monitor. And so I can sit here at my desk and I can just look straight ahead without having to look down. I'm looking straight ahead at the screen, at what I'm doing. Yes, and it's wonderful. But I did have to kind of shift things, because I had my desk over there centered on the window. The problem was, now I couldn't see out the window, and I liked having my view and liked being able to see out the window while I was working. So I shifted it over towards the corner, and now I can sit right there, I can do my work, and I can look up out the window. And I've got my little helpers in here. Shati. This little dude, I caught him this morning. It was chore time. I had gone into the bedroom to put on my clothing since I was still in my pajamas and put in my contacts and all that good stuff. And I came out, and guess who was drinking my coffee? That one right there. He was totally caught. Little stinker. Alright, so now that this is all done, and now that my work for the day is complete, I'm going to head into the kitchen and I am going to get dinner started. So I'm getting dinner going, but while I get dinner going, there's actually something kind of important that I want to talk to all of you about. So, years ago, when I first started blogging with a B, I started my very first blog as essentially a ministry. I saw it as a way to minister to young moms, new wives, who didn't learn the skills from their mothers of how to cook a meal for their family, how to take care of the home. And so I saw that as a way of ministering and filling a need. One of the things that led me to do that was through our Army life, through all of the people that I met. There was this one lady in particular, shortly before I started blogging, that I met, who, her husband was in the Army, and he deployed a lot more than even Mr. Smith did. And her husband was the cook in the family. He did all of the cooking. She could not cook anything, and this is her own words. She said that she could not cook hamburger helper. And I asked her, I was mortified. How can you not cook hamburger helper? She had never learned how to cook. No one had ever taught her. Her mother didn't cook. And so I asked her, I'm like, well, how do you feed your kids when your husband is deployed? And her answer broke my heart. she said, well, we can go to McDonald's. Now, over the years, I actually met quite a few people who were kind of in the same situation. They had never learned how to cook. They didn't have the skills. They didn't know where to look. They didn't know where to learn. So then a couple years later, I had a little bit of a get-together with some friends one day, and I mentioned something about the home ec class that I was teaching at the time. It was a homeschool home ec class. And I've told this particular story a couple of times in the past, but for those who haven't heard it, I had a friend who piped up when I mentioned the homeschooling home ec class, and she said that she wished there was home ec for grown-ups because I was teaching the girls things that she hadn't learned. And so not long after that is when I started blogging for the very first time. And when I started, I had that friend and those ladies that I had met over the years in mind. I wrote my recipes in such a way that you didn't need to learn the lingo. You didn't need to know how to cook the recipes that I shared. I wrote them very simple. They were very step by step. This is how you do these things. So then a few years later, we were living in Alaska, and by that point I had kind of established my blog, my first real blog. It was called Mrs. Mama Hen. And I had been dedicating a lot of time and energy into this blog. It was before I started doing it professionally. I had not made a penny from my blog, but I had invested all of this time and energy into this blog. And one day I was just really frustrated about it all. And I remember praying about it and saying, you know, Lord, is all of this time and energy that I'm taking away my family to do this, does it even matter? Is it even making a difference to anybody? Or am I just completely wasting my time and wasting my energy? And should I be focusing on doing something else with my time? Well, the very next day, I got an answer. I got an email from a lady who had been a reader of my blog, and it was a very long email, very heartfelt letter. And in the letter, she talked about how she and her family never ate dinner together, that the family was always scattered, always busy with their own lives. And she found my blog and started cooking the recipes that she found on my blog. And before long, her family would start asking questions like, what are we having for supper tonight? What are you going to make tonight? And she started noticing that everybody wanted to be there at dinner time. Everybody wanted to have, I'm going to get emotional, everybody wanted to have supper together. And so she explained to them that she had found this blog and that this is where she was getting all these new recipes. And her family started getting together and going through my blog and planning a menu and cooking the meals together and eating supper together every night. Stop it! Stop it! No, we don't do this. No. And I was like, Lord, this is why I do this. This is why I do this. And so I kept at it. And over time, my blog grew and grew with more recipes, better photography. My skills were developing. I was learning how to do things that I didn't know how to do before. And eventually I decided it was time to make a move to a professional blog. I made the jump. And the number one reason that I did that was I wanted the ability to have printable, downloadable versions of all my recipes. And that wasn't something that I could do on my little free Blogspot blog. It didn't have the capabilities. Now at the time, I would download my emails to my computer, and I would have them all stored on my computer, and so I never deleted that email. I hung on to that because that email was kind of the confirmation that this is what I needed to be doing. And anytime I found myself getting discouraged, anytime I felt like I was wasting my time, I would go back and I would look at that email. But then one day, something awful happened. Technology failed me, and my computer crashed, and I lost that email. And I, to this day, have been kicking myself that I never printed it out and had a hard copy of that email that was sent to me, as well as others that I've received over the years. And this morning, I had someone send me a very precious and heartfelt message. And it reminded me that we need to keep these things. If someone writes you a letter, you should print it out, because our letters today are digital. We don't have physical, actual letters from our loved ones and our friends anymore. And we're going to want to have the ability to look back at those. Our children, our grandchildren, they're going to want the ability to look at the correspondence of their grandparents, of their, their elders, and have those memories and have those interactions to look back on. A couple years ago, when we were still kind of getting settled here at the farm in our new home, I was sorting things out, and I came across a letter. And I shared this in a video, and I read it in the video. And it was the last letter that my grandmother ever wrote me before she passed away. And it is something that I cherish to this day. And I'll share a link to that. One of the funniest things about it is it was all about chickens. But here we are in this day and age where there's so much communication that we have with one another, and yet it's all digital. It's not physical. So when I first started thinking about talking about this subject, I was going to give this as advice to new bloggers or vloggers, that if you have a reader or a subscriber send you a message, especially if it's something that just really touches you, print it out, put it someplace safe, have a file that you can keep these things for posterity, because you never know what might happen. Don't think you're going to have a digital copy of it. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this isn't just advice for bloggers and vloggers. This is advice for all of us. All of us. And so, needless to say, I took that sweet message that was sent to me this morning, and I printed it out, and I put it someplace safe. And I've been doing that the last few years now. Anytime I have something that is sent to me, something cherished like that, I make a physical copy, and I put it someplace safe. So that email, that original email, that was the first one that I got from a reader that made me cry, no matter how stoic I may be, and it still moves me to this day.